Hello and welcome back to another daily Bible reading. Jesse Nelson.
Edwin Jones.
We are the ministers here at Little North City Church of Christ, and we are in Matthew. I almost said John.
Whoops.
Matthew chapter 14. We are just coming at the end of the kingdom parables, and now we're going to get into a kind of a leading up to people believing Jesus being the Son of God and his first.
This is the end game of all of this.
Time of worship, outside of him being worshipped at his birth. But since he started his ministry, his own disciples are seeing something.
Which shows a progression that's a good progression to have.
Yep. And so I think I read first.
I think you do.
All right. Now, the end of chapter 13, as we already talked about yesterday, which is today for us, but yesterday for you, he's not accepted in his own home, but we're going to see another rejection of Jesus, one by Herod, by saying he's just another John the Baptist being resurrected, but through rejecting John is also rejecting Jesus, because Jesus is John's the forerunner of Jesus. So it's kind of like taking out people who attack Deuteronomy. If they can get rid of Deuteronomy,
or Genesis, either one,
you can
the whole thing falls.
The whole thing falls apart. And if you can get rid of John, and
there is no Jesus.
Yeah. So okay. Chapter 14, verse 1, at that time Herod the Tetrarch heard about the fame of Jesus. So this is no small thing.
His fame is going to, and then it's going to struggle.
Yep. He said to his servants, this is John the Baptist. He has been raised from the dead. That is why these miraculous powers are at work in him.
Because John himself didn't work any miracles.
Yeah. So do you think he's saying this because he's afraid that John has come back? Or what do you think?
You know, one of the things, he's a superstitious man. He didn't want to behead John.
No.
He got pushed into it by scheming women. But so I think a certain amount of this is he's just kind of freaked out by this whole thing. What's going on?
Yeah, there's either that or it's kind of like, hey, he's another John the Baptist. I took care of him.
Yeah, I know how to take care of him. Well, he's got a head just like everybody else.
Yeah. All right, so now he's going to kind of give some history on that statement. You're going to go backwards. For Herod had seized John, bound him, put him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. Now, we know historically that Herod had a political marriage with some king from a foreign nation. I can't remember exactly. I think it was Egypt. And when his brother came to visit Rome, he stayed with Herod. And when he did, Herod and Herodias fell in love, and he made Herodias divorce Philip so that he could marry her. Well, this is actually...
John didn't care for that, did he?
He didn't care for that. And actually Leviticus 16 prohibits under the law that you will not covet or see the nakedness of your brother's wife.
That's right. So it's a very definite legality of the Old Covenant.
Yeah. And now if Philip would have died, Herod would have had a responsibility to marry her.
Leave her right there.
But not while he is living and they're married and all that kind of stuff.
Here's interesting because ultimately he's an man, but he wants to play the religious card because he's over Jews.
Yep.
Imagine that, a politician who wants to pretend like he has the religious convictions of his people.
Never seen it.
I've never either.
Never heard of it. All right. For Herod had seized John, bound him, put him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother's wife, Philip's wife, because John had been saying to him, it is not lawful for you to have her.
Right out in front of everybody.
Yep. And though he wanted to put him to death, he feared the people because they held him to be a prophet. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before the company and pleased Herod, so that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she might ask. This is
a little weird right here, isn't it?
You know what? It's the whole I'll promise I'll give you half the kingdom. Anything up to half the kingdom. Just
in front of all these people.
Don't make those kind of promises.
No.
Right. And don't let a couple shakes of some hips. Men.
Yeah. Avert your glance. Tell you, as my roommate once said to me about a completely different thing, get your clothes on.
Yeah, but this fearing people actually comes into Jesus's and John's benefit at times, where because they feared the people, they would not lay hands on Jesus at times.
They got some more time.
And so they've got to actually get the people on board. That's like when they're crucifying Jesus and they finally convince the crowd to say crucify him, crucify him.
Yeah.
That's when they got a
Okay,
slam
let's do
dunk
this.
case.
Yeah. Hey, it's interesting that Herod, could have. He was wanting to put him to death. He gets the time to put him to death, and he don't want to put him to death.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the crowd and all that. Sometimes we make high talk about what we'll do and all that, but we're really not going to do it.
No.
But now it's handed to him on a silver platter, so to speak.
So prompted by her mother, she said, get the mothers involved, give me the head of John the Baptist here on a platter. That's a
How gross
gruesome.
is that?
Yeah. The king was sorry, but because of his oaths and his guess, he commanded it to be given. He sent and had John beheaded in the prison, and his head was brought on a platter, given to the girl. She brought it to her mother, and his disciples came and took the body, buried it, and they went and told Jesus.
These people are dysfunctional.
Dysfunctional. And what we're about to see is Jesus push through a time in his life where he wanted to be alone. He heard this news. He's going to try to be alone. Over and over and over again, he's going to try to be alone here and take some time to himself. Yet, his ministry comes first. So even his own personal... John is his cousin.
He could legit take some time off.
Take some time off.
But there's something more important than that.
And we're going to see this word compassion in here. And once again, he's been telling everyone else,
Be compassionate.
go see what this means to have compassion and mercy and not sacrifice.
He needs to show.
And he's going to show it. So now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd and had compassion on them and healed their sick. So he tried to withdraw, and when he withdrew, people followed him. But he sees them, and Mark gives us a little bit, actually more of an explanation.
Yes.
He tried to go away, and when he saw them, he couldn't help but go.
It's more important than his own rest, if you
Yeah.
will, or grief.
Because of that compassion. That's what compassion will do.
It'll
If you
get you
truly have compassion, it's not just, oh, I'm sorry, Edwin, but I will go out of my way. What do you need?
As Percy Sledge, one of my favorite philosophers, once said, when a man loves a woman, he'll sit out in the rain.
When a man...
Loves-
I'm sure no one wanted to
enough
hear
of
that.
Sorry.
All right. Now, when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, this is a desolate place, and the day is now over. Send the crowds away to go into villages and buy food for themselves. So even now his disciples, once again, imagine Jesus being your rabbi. You've been out all day. You've been healing people all day, teaching all day. You've just found out your cousin's dead. A person who's very close with Jesus, who had been close with his family, who he loved, kind of like Lazarus. And his disciples are seeing Jesus weary. I love, actually, there is an episode of The Chosen, which you still haven't watched, that depicts this, of Jesus just like
Spent.
drenched in like sweat and dirt, and you can see him barely able to walk out of the tent. And they're like, rest, my Lord, rest. Send everyone away. And he goes, no. Don't send them away. They've been here all day. We're going to show hospitality, essentially, and we're going to feed them. It's amazing.
Woman at the well, I have food to eat that you know not of.
Yeah. But Jesus says they need not go away. You give them something to eat. In a time of Jesus' need, he's helping others. It just amazes
And he's
me.
putting it on them.
Yeah.
You know stuff. Let's see what you do.
They said to him, we have only 5 loaves here and 2 fish. He said, bring them here to me. Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. Then he broke the loaves, gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. They all ate and were satisfied, and they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces left over. Those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Now remember, when you go back to some of the kingdom parables, is the fact that when you choose this, there will be an overabundance.
Far more than you started with.
And he's proving it. And Jesus you just got to get this scene of being completely spent, exhausted, worn out, and he's doing miracle on top of miracle and healing, and he's willing to keep going for others.
He asked that they do what they can do. They pick
Yeah.
up this little bit. That's not much, but that you can do that. Do it.
Yeah.
I'll take care of the rest.
And he's trying to get them to have the same faith. And I think they're about to get a glimpse of that in this next part.
Big time.
So this is your turn to read.
Immediately he made the disciples get in the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he sent the crowds away. And after he sent the crowds away, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. And when it was evening, he was there alone. But the boat was already a long distance from the land, battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." So maybe we can pause there for just a second. It's calming tumultuous seas.
Yeah.
Anything in the Old Testament about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, Psalm 107 speaks about him being the Lord of storms, that God calms this. He has the power to calm the seas.
Some of the fake gods were said to be that.
Yeah.
But they can't do this.
They can't do
He
it.
shows he's the real deal.
Even Jonah, remember the story of Jonah, they understood that the storm they were going through was caused by the gods.
Yeah, the pagans understood that.
And it stopped by God.
They had fear of Jehovah because he'd been delivering goods for a while.
Yeah.
Peter said to him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But seeing the wind, he became frightened. Began to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand, took hold of him, and said to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" He got into the boat. The wind stopped, and those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "You're certainly God's son."
So, interesting. I didn't really, sometimes when you do these, when you're reading through it all at once, like the whole book of Matthew, you see more. This parable of the soils is Peter's faith, this little faith, is his deep faith that's grounded. He says he's got little faith.
He
So
starts floundering. It's like, ah!
even Peter is having to be
Brought along,
and his soil has to be tilled and worked on and trained, and there's a lot of good stuff for us because sometimes in our moments of weak faith we get very discouraged, and I've heard people say, am I even a follower of God? Do I believe if I don't have faith to get through this? And they get so discouraged that they almost walk away from God, and that's actually the moment where you give yourself more to God,
Yes.
rather than back
And
off.
are thankful for him being there. The next step for you and me is all God asks of you.
Yeah.
You're at a place, somebody else may be 14 steps down the road, they're being asked to take the 15th. You're just being able to take the next one. It's a process, and Jesus respects our individuality and growth.
Yeah. And he says, "You are the Son of God." So, and yours says God's Son, mine says Son of God, but that's a title that they understood is worthy of worship. And they understood the only person you're allowed to worship is God.
Yes,
So
yes,
Son
yes.
of God is not just like we are sons of God.
No.
But this was a title.
This was a messianic God title,
Yeah, and they're seeing him more than just a man. They're starting to get there.
hence worship.
Yeah.
When they had crossed over, they came to land at the Gennesaret, and when they got to the place, recognized him, and they sent word in all the surrounding districts and brought to him all who were sick. And they implored him that they might just touch the fringe of his cloak, and as many as touched it were cured. Oh, this is so much like modern day miracles, isn't it? Not
No.
everybody. There's only one delayed miracle, and that was to make a theological point. Everybody else gets totally, completely healed on the spot in droves.
So that lady who had the hemorrhage wasn't really out of character to think if I just touch her. She's not the only one who thought that.
No.
There were other people who thought if I just touch
This
the
man
hem.
has power.
And then Paul or Peter also, they were touching the hem of his garment and they were being
There was
healed
that.
in the Acts.
Yeah, in Acts.
Yeah. And here's an interesting thing. These people are hearing about him, and they're doing all that they can to get to him. Does that sound kind of like the pearl and the treasure?
Yeah.
Whatever
Nothing
we
else
need to
matters
do
anymore.
To get to Jesus, if we just touch him,
Might have been dinner time. They don't care.
we will be healed. And if we had that determination, first we got to understand these people, sometimes physical sickness is easy because you feel it.
Yeah.
You see it.
Yeah.
It's affecting you. But spiritual
sickness,
sickness, you
more
don't know
insidious.
you don't always see it. You see the effects of it.
Others may see it,
Others definitely see
and
it.
pride may keep us from owning it.
And once we recognize our sin, and once we recognize that we are spiritually sick, is when, if I just get to Jesus.
I made a comment in the teen class yesterday that, speaking from experience, outside of Christ, nobody's really happy. You can't really be happy outside of Christ. And one of the reasons I became a Christian, there were several, but this was one of the big ones. I had no hope. I was unhappy with myself. I had no answers, but Jesus did.
Yeah. Yep. So that's Matthew chapter 14.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're about to see, we're kind of building up to the crescendo of this is going to be the great confession that in chapter 16 that
Yes.
Peter's going to make.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to see constantly people, what's the word, where they're combative against Jesus or whatever. And Jesus is going to expose why they can't see him.
You're going to get closer, you're going to go further away.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, there's Matthew chapter 14. And tomorrow we will be doing Matthew chapter 15.
A very interesting chapter.
Very interesting chapter. So we love you.
Yes, we do.
And God bless.
Bye-bye.